you know, we are now, as we start this session, I think maybe it's important, the question that you brought up about Kabbalah and Halakha. What was the role of Kabbalah in the Sephardic tradition? So there, if you look at it historically, there were definitely fluctuations, and that's an important topic. I discussed it in another series called, of Introduction to Kabbalah, about Kabbalah and Halakha. In a nutshell, you could say that when we had periods of extreme rationalism, that brought a wave of mysticism in the next generation, or push towards the midrash, because we can't look at the Torah as a dry legal codex, right? As a book of engineering. It has to have a narrative. So the extreme rationalism of the Rambam at a certain point pushed out the narrative. So mysticism brought the narrative back in. The Zohar, the rise of the Zohar, was deeply reflected in the writing of the Shulchan Aruch, not in the external or the visible plane, but more deeply in his commentary. But Yosef, in his private writings, and later on, when you go the 500 years from Rabbi Yosef Karo till today, there were different impacts of Kabbalah on different centers of Jewish culture, both in Europe and in the Sephardic world. But those specific three rabbis that we talk about, rabbi-messas, Rabbi Toledano, and Rabbi Shlush, do not mix Kabbalah with the Halakha. Even though they are knowledgeable of Kabbalah, they don't use it as a halachic source, which is part of their forward thinking, that they understand that the Kabbalah has a certain role and the Halakha has a different role. I can also tell you from my own family that my great grandfather, who was a Kabbalist himself, he was a famous Kabbalist, Rabbi Ovadia. Let me show you his. That's him. So he was I think I showed you, he was a chief rabbi in Baghdad, and he was a Kabbalist. And I didn't have the honor to meet him, but I learned under my grandfather, Rabbi Shaul Ftaya, who also was very knowledgeable in Kabbalah, and he spoke several times about practices and halachot that were influenced by Kabbalah. And he said that they are not meant for the masses. They are meant only for the true Kabbalists. And that's an interesting concept. Like, why would he say that? And when you look at the development of halakha, you realize that there are different. I mean, you could be a mystical person. You could be someone who learns Kabbalah and is inspired by it. But what happened with halakha is that there were certain practices and customs that were pushed out of circulation because of different reasons, and they were reestablished by Kabbalah, giving them Kabbalistic reasons. Now, those reasons can be misunderstood by some people as bordering on paganism. I'll give you one example, one favorite example, and that is what is called Mayim Achronim. In Yiddish, letzte Wasser, the water that you wash your fingers with before saying Birkat Hamazon. So the original statement in the Talmud is Mayim Rishonim Mitzvah, Mayim Emtzayim Reshut, Mayim Achronim Chova. Washing before the meal is a mitzvah. Washing in the middle is optional. Washing at the end is an obligation. So the Gemara says, what is the difference between a mitzvah and an obligation? Why do you call the final water, right, the water at the end of the meal, why is it called an obligation? And the answer of the Talmud is, it's not a religious mitzvah. It's an obligation to maintain your health. And the Gemara explains that people used to eat with their fingers, and the salt that they used was harvested from the Dead Sea. It's called sodomite salt, which contains many minerals. And if you ate with your fingers and you touch that salt, and then without washing your fingers, you would touch your fingers to your eye, that could cause blindness. So they said you must wash your fingers at the end of the meal. With time, when you move forward up to the 12th, 13th century, people didn't eat with their fingers that much, and they didn't have that salt also. So the danger was not there, and the practice was abandoned. But it was reestablished by the Zohar, by Kabbalistic writings, saying that it's important to wash your fingers at the end of the meal. And how did they explain it? They said, you had a whole meal, and you said blessings, and you thanked God, but there was one entity that didn't get any share of the meal. Who is that entity? Which is it? Do you know? It's the Sitra Ahara, the other side, the dark side. So the mystic said that you have to give a portion to the dark side, and in order to do that, you wash your hands with water. And even they got to the extreme of saying you have to say a verse, Zeh Helek Adam Rasha Me'Elohim. This is the portion of the wicked person. Now, whether you want to accept it as is, be it as it may, but whatever the explanation is there is a danger of a person who's not initiated or not immersed in Kabbalah to say, are we talking here about equal forces, that we have to give a share to God and share to the other side? What this is really almost paganism, right? So maybe someone who's deeply learned in Kabbalah would be able to understand that. So my grandfather said, "This is not for us. This is not for us. This is for the." So we didn't do that, and we didn't do other customs that stem from Kabbalah. So, what is in between the true Kabbalist, according to my grandfather, and to the one who's not a true Kabbalist? I think the difference is just as, and it's analogous. I don't have the yardstick to measure true Kabbalists, but I think that I have that yardstick in an analogy with cars. Let's say if I know someone who's a fan of fast cars, and let's say he knows let's say the Lamborghini Murcielago, he knows it in and out. He knows all the bolts and nuts and how long does it take to go from 0 to 60 and traction and all this. He knows all the details. You wake him up in the middle of the night and he will tell you to the last dot on the owner's manual. Beautiful, but he never drove the car and he never had the experience. So this is the same thing when you talk about what people call the true Kabbalists and those who study Kabbalah or following the customs of the Kabbalah. Those are people who learn it technically. They know the names of the Sefirot, they know the concepts, but they never had a spiritual experience that is based on mysticism. So I think with these rabbis also, rabbi-messas, Rabbi Toledano and Shlush that we're going to look at, they also were of the opinion that you don't mix Kabbalah with Halakha. So we'll go to the next Halakha in the reader, and that is a very important statement that Rabbi Yosef Messas makes on the commentary of Rashi. So here it's a methodological concept, just as the comment that we saw previously when he spoke about the Talmud, and he says that the scholars of the Talmud can make a mistake. So he disagrees with the tendency to attribute to the authors of the Talmud divine powers, that they can never err, that they are infallible. So here he talks about Rashi's commentary. Rashi's commentary has become legendary, and in the Orthodox world there is a tendency to equate Rashi's commentary with the Torah itself, to basically saying that the only valid interpretation of the Torah is that of Rashi. Now, no one would argue that Rashi's commentary is not beautiful. It's beautiful, it's eloquent, it's pleasant to read, but it is not divine, and it's not the only commentary available, and definitely not authoritative to say this is what's written and nothing else. So, and the insistence of taking Rashi's words literally or as the final word on the Torah can create a lot of problems. I'll give one example. The first commentary of Rashi on the Torah, which a lot of rabbis like to quote, Rashi asks the following question, as is asked in the Midrash. He asks, why did the Torah start from the creation of the world? It should have started in chapter 12 in Shemot, in Exodus, where it says, this month for you shall be the first month of the year. And why is that? Because it's the first mitzvah that was given to the nation as a whole. And Rashi answers this question. He says there was a need to show that God controls the world and He gave the land to us, whatever it is. Now, Rashi had to make this statement because his community at the time was about to endure. They already felt the oncoming crusades. They felt the animosity from the local Christian community, and they also knew that Eretz Israel is in the hand of the Muslims. So here they are in a foreign land. They have no control over their land. The Eretz Israel is disputed over between the Christians and the Muslims, and they ask themselves, "What have we done to deserve this?" And Rashi comes with this kind of a mythical explanation that is somehow based on the book of Genesis. So he answers the question, and he answers to his community, to his time. But if someone is not careful with this analysis, if we don't do this analysis, and we, like some people in the Orthodox world, take Rashi as an ultimate authority, we remain with this premise that the Torah is only a legal codex, and anything which is not pure law should not be written. And that's a distortion of the whole purpose of the Torah. Because the Torah, first and foremost, is about the narrative, is about the personal story and the individual experience. Because without that, you will have no Torah, you have no tradition to keep. So here is this discussion that rabbi-messas brings up. As I said here in my footnote, when he speaks about Rashi is not the ultimate authority, the educational system and most of the rabbis refer to Rashi's commentary as the principal and most authoritative commentary on the Torah. So here I will start first with the rabbi-messas' original text, and then we'll go to the English. So I'm going to read just the question, the letter that he got. This is in chapter 339.15 in the first volume of Tzavir Tavim. עוד כתב כבודו שסיפר לו חכם אחד מארץ הקודש שהיה בקושטא. He was one rabbi originally from Israel, visited Constantinople in Turkey, and he found בפנקס הישן של הקהל שהגאון הגדול הראם ז"ל, מראה דאתרא, the great, he saw that in the diary or the protocols of the community, he found written that the great rabbi Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, who was the rabbi of the city of Constantinople, אחר שהשלים חיבורו הגדול מזרחי על רש"י, after he finished his commentary on Rashi's commentary, this is a commentary on a commentary. Rashi's commentary has hundreds of commentaries written around it. So he finished his book. צם כמה צומות וסיגף עצמו עד שנגנה עליו רש"י ז"ל בחלום. He fasted for several days and he afflicted himself, praying to have a revelation, to be able to talk to the soul of Rashi. And finally Rashi came to him in his dream, and he said, "Harbe yaga'ata, velo yaradeta lesof da'ati, rak b'makom ploni v'tu lo." And Rashi told him, "You worked very hard, but you only understood me in one place, no more." And that's what you found written in the protocols of the community, and you wanted to ask me if I heard about that, and what do I think? So rabbi-messas answered this, "Yedidi, דברים אלו לא שמעתי בלתי היום מפי כתבך." I have never heard such a thing until today from your letter. ומחוסר אמנה אני בהם. I find it very hard to believe. ואפשר דנהפך למספר לכבודו. And I think there was a mistake. That the dream was, in the dream, Rashi told the commentator, "You only misunderstood me in one place. Not, you only understood me in one place." So there was a misunderstanding in that message. But then he adds something. השגור בפי חכמים לומר, על כל טיפת דיו של רש"י ז"ל צריך לשב 7 נקיים. He says, some people say that in order to understand one dot of ink that came from Rashi's quill, you have to sort of fast 7 days. This is a wordplay on the laws of Nida, where if there is a spotting, a woman has to count 7 clean days without a spotting and then go to the mikveh. So people took it to an extreme and says for Rashi to understand one dot of ink, you have to wait 7 clean days without other thoughts, or maybe go to the mikveh. And he says, this is an exaggeration and flowery language. That you have to really delve into his words and analyze them thoroughly. And really, if you do the math, if you had to wait 7 days to understand even when a one dot, even if we extend to one letter, you would never be able to finish his commentary on the Torah. He said, you have to take it with a grain of salt. Yes, the rabbis had great appreciation to Rashi's commentary, and they said that you have to learn very well and analyze every word he says. But what happens if after all this analysis, his words do not make sense or are not acceptable? What do you do? It says, Nakshe alav. We will reject his statement and we will argue with him. She'af shaya hacham eloki, vadai shelo palat mishgiot. Even though he was wise almost in an inhuman way, he is not infallible. No one is infallible. והרבה פעמים יקשו עליו התוספות והמפרשים ז"ל. And we find that the Tosafot, those who wrote commentaries to the Talmud, who were his disciples and grandchildren, wrote against him. And the other commentators, and Rashbam Nechdo, his grandson, his own grandson, Rabbeinu Shmuel ben Meir, diber baseter kashot negdo, indirectly spoke very harshly against him, and and that is Parashat Vayehi al Pasuk Gur Aryeh, in his commentary to the blessings of Yaakov. Rashi writes on the blessing to Yehuda that when Yaakov said, Gur Aryeh Yehuda miterev beni alita, you are a lion cub, you rose from devouring animals, my son. Rashi says that it refers to the selling of Yosef, that Yaakov was telling Yehuda, you tried to devour my son, but you overcame that. But Rashbam, the grandson of Rashi, said, "Hamefarsho b'mechirat Yosef." Anyone who interprets this verse as speaking of the selling of Yosef, lo yada peshuto shel pasuk velo bechiluk ta'amim klal, does not understand the text and does not know how to read the verse with the trope. This is a very harsh statement to say. If I come and say, you don't know how to read the text, you don't know how to read it with the ta'amim, with the trope, that is something that Rashbam said about his own grandfather, Rashi. It's also interesting, he doesn't bring it here because there's a statement in Rashbam that was censored, it was purged out of the books, and only reinstituted in the latest editions of Rashbam's commentary on the Torah, and that is, Rashbam writes the following: Harbe pe'amim nitvakachti lefanav. I argued with my grandfather many times. Vehoda lefanai, and he admitted, she'im haya penai, if he had time, he would have written new commentaries. Al pi hapeshatot hamitchadeshim kol yom. He would have written new commentaries according to the new understanding that he has every day. That is a very powerful statement of Rashbam that Rabbi Yosef Meshas was not aware of because it was not in the printed editions. And what it means is that Rashi himself did not hold his commentary, did not view it as authoritative or as the final word. Rather, he did, and that is my opinion, by the way, I think that Rashi, to judge by the fluency of the writing, Rashi probably wrote his commentary in one sitting. Maybe it took him a couple of months, maybe more. But after years of studying, he just took the time to sit down and write a commentary. And I don't think that he ever went and reviewed and edited it. Because of that, there are many cases where you would find a deviation from the original text of the Midrash that he quotes. So when Rashi quotes a Midrash but not verbatim, many commentators ask, why did he change the text? Or why did he quote the Midrash on a different verse, not on the original verse on which it was said? And they come with many, many explanations, but I think that the explanation is much simpler. He wrote it from memory. And he didn't bother to look at it, he didn't have time for that. And he told his grandson, if I had time, I would write more commentaries. I don't have time for that. So, but Rabbi Yosef Messas says, you realize that Rashi is contested by his own students and his own grandson to the extent of saying he does not know the text. He says, Ve'en beze giri'uta halila. And admitting that Rashi was maybe not, is not infallible, that he made mistakes, to admit that there's nothing wrong with it. Why? This happened also to the Talmudic rabbis. Again, he goes to discussing the Talmudic rabbis. It's important for him, as an original thinker, to let you know that you could question everything. You're allowed to question. If something does not make sense, you're allowed to question. You're allowed to argue. And he brings an example. For example, Hai Burchahi, one of the rabbis in the Talmud says something, and they answer, it doesn't make sense, or Bedutahi, it's a lie, or Mahachu ala b'ma'arava, people laugh at your statement. Dvarim she'amarti lachem ta'utem be'yadi. Those are all references, in all of them appear here. What I told you was, he says, one of the rabbis says, what I told you was a mistake. According to the Talmud, it says, Gama malachim ta'u, even the angels, according to one story in the Talmud, the angels made a mistake. And he says, he concludes with this, Ve'im malachei alyon shagegu, ma ya'aseh yelud isha. Even if the angels can make a mistake, what would a mere mortal do? So obviously we can make mistakes. Veshalom. He always concludes with peace. That is his nature, that is his signature. So let's go for a second to the English text, if it's worth it to read it again. No, you have all of it here, and you have all the sources. Ketubot, Pesachim, Nazir. If you want to check them, they're all there. Ketubot 63:2, Pesachim 11:1, Nazir 42:1, Shabbat 60, etc. They're all in the Talmud. Okay. The next halakha that I highlighted here from the writings of rabbi-messas is this. He says this: people should not live in fear of losing berachot, of losing blessings, as in the case of whether or not to say bore nefashot after drinking tea or coffee. That is, just like his discussion of praying with the community, this is something also I think fall under the same category, and that is the understanding that some people let their religious practice become some kind of an obsessive compulsive behavior. Religion and OCD go hand in hand, and there's actually a name for religious OCD. It's called scrupulosity, being scrupulous, and it's really scary when it gets out of hand. But in many cases, you have what is the core problem of OCD is the fear that maybe I didn't do something in the right way. Something is not clean enough. I didn't lock the door. I didn't turn off the gas. I didn't lock, etc., etc. And then you go back and back, right? So that fear for many people is, an internal fear between me and my settings or my demands. When God is involved, it becomes much more problematic, because if you think of washing hands not just as cleanliness, but as purity, and you're afraid maybe my hands are not pure enough, you end up washing your hands once and twice and thrice, and then some people do it 9 times, and you chant the verses 100 times, and then also you're afraid of this. There's an obsession with the blessing. Should I say the blessing, or shouldn't I? Should I say when you drink a full cup of water, for example, you say at the end, Baruch Ata Hashem, Borei nefashot rabot v'chesronan hakol shebarata. It's like the very, very short Birkat Hamazon, right? And people were concerned over that question. When you drink a cup of water, you have to drink a certain quantity within a certain time. But if you drink small sips, every 5 minutes, you don't have to say the blessing. So now, what happens when you drink tea or coffee? You can't drink it because it's too hot, but maybe you would have wanted to. But basically, there are a lot of arguments around that. And people came to the point where they're afraid of the possibility that they missed the blessing. Before we go into his discussion, I will tell you the way I interpreted this halakha for a friend of mine in a different setting, and that was someone who was a traveling salesman, and his role, he had to go out, in and out of his to his car several times a day, and he had a bottle of water, and he said, I don't know, I said the blessing for the water, and now I go out, and I come back, now it's a new thing, should I say the blessing again? I don't know. And I showed him a ruling of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who says that if, some people say that when something similar, you go to sleep and you have a cup of water by your bed, right? And then you wake up in the middle of the night and you want to drink. Do you have to say a blessing? Some people say, yes, you have to say a blessing. And then they say, but wait, you cannot say a blessing because your hands are unclean. You have to go wash your hands. The problem is, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef says, by the time you got out of bed, and you went and you washed your hands for cleanliness or for purity, and maybe you said a blessing over washing your hands, and then you went back to bed and you said a blessing over the water, and you drank the water, now you lost your sleep, you can't fall back asleep. All you wanted, you were coughing a little bit, and you wanted some water. Now you have to go through the whole process. He said you could rely on the blessing that you said before you went to sleep. Because of this rule, safek brachot leakel. When you're in doubt whether you should or not say the blessing, go with the lenient opinion and don't say the blessing. So I explained to my friend. I said, this is what I think lies at the core of this statement. What does it mean when in doubt, don't say a blessing? It means that we have to go to the objective of the law and understand it, whether to, instead of just sticking to the ritual. Why are we required to say a blessing? Because the blessing is a sign of recognition and acknowledgement to God. We say thank you to God, right? Now, in the case of my friend, the traveling salesman, or the person who goes to sleep, both people want to say a blessing. They're not trying to enjoy God's world without saying thank you. They're just not sure if they should or should not say it. So the fact that you are debating it in itself shows that you appreciate the gift that was given to you. And God knows your thoughts, and He's okay, don't say the blessing. Don't worry, I don't need you. It's almost like saying, don't say thank you too much, because then it becomes a burden, right? So, but Rabbi Yosef here speaks about the fear of losing a blessing. He answers, since these drinks are too hot to drink the amount that necessitates the bracha, some people suggested to wait until the drinks cool down. So some people said, okay, the problem, like I said, you have to drink a certain quantity with a certain time, but you can't do it with tea or coffee. So some people found a simple solution: just let the coffee cool down and then drink it all at once and gulp it down. Other people suggested that you could eat a fruit with the drink in order to say borei nefashot. So a cup of water, a cup of tea, and an apple, and then you could say bracha for both. Rabbi-messas says there's no need, because you have to want to have the hot drink, and you want to have it hot. You don't need anything else. Don't complicate one's life with all of these suggestions. So let's see it in the Hebrew, and here. עוד שאל כבודו, מי ששתה רביעית או יותר, קפה או תה צוננים, אם חייב לברך לבסוף בורא נפשות. The question was, I drank cold tea or cold coffee. He's not referring, by the way, to iced tea or iced coffee, because this is the way you drink it. He's talking about hot tea that was left to cool down. Remember that when he wrote that, you really didn't have a way to make iced coffee or iced tea. We were so used to think of, so you just throw some ice cubes into it. Back then, even when I was a kid, I still remember the what they called argas akera, the ice box, where some people in my neighborhood had that there was a cart going around with ice blocks, and you would put them in the ice box to keep food cold. We had a fridge. It's called Amkor Hatasre. I'm not that ancient, but I know of people who still had it, from the 50s. So they didn't have ice cubes. He's not talking about iced tea or iced coffee. He's speaking about people who left their tea or coffee to cool down. He says, Davar ze meforash, he answers. He gives the sources, Ba'erete v'yad Aaron, she'anshei ma'aseh manichim oto litztanen, that the pious people who care about the blessing let the coffee cool down so they could say a blessing at the end. And he quotes another rabbi who says, Anshei ma'aseh halalu, those proactive people or pious people, lo asu velo klum, they did nothing, or meaning they didn't bring any benefit. Why? She'en derech lishtotam tzonenim, says people don't drink cold coffee or cold tea. You want to drink it hot. So he says, he alludes to that. Not only they did not save us from the problem of, can I say a blessing at the end? Maybe I don't even have to say a blessing at the beginning, because there's a rule in the laws of blessings that if you consume a certain thing in the way that most people do not consume it, you don't say a blessing. For example, if you have a very sour fruit that most people would not eat as it is until it ripens, it's sort of like it is half ripe, right? And it needs to ripen more. And you decide to eat it as is, you don't say a blessing. If you decide to eat a crude olive, uncured, you don't say a blessing, because people don't eat like that. So he says, you with your obsession of fixing the law, you ended up causing more damage, because maybe you said a blessing that's not necessary. En derech lishtotam tzonenim. So, but still, that rabbi said, I have other options. כתב שאפשר לתקן שאוכל וישתה דבר דבעי ברכת בורא נפשות, or maybe you could eat something else that requires the less bracha and then you'll be okay. He says, המנהג פשוט אצלנו שאין מברכים עליהם לסוף ואין עושים שום תיקון. It's a widespread custom among us. You just don't say a blessing at the end. Just live with it. You drank hot tea, you didn't drink a large amount at once, and that's okay. You don't have to do tikkun. You don't have to strive to create a situation for which you say a blessing. But that's telling of the approach of saying, live life normally, and if you have to do a ritual, do it, and if you don't, you wouldn't. We'll see later on, much later in his, I think, second or third book, when he speaks about checking vegetables for bugs, that here also, people become obsessive and they search for bugs with microscopes. And I know of some people who wouldn't drink water in New York because there are tiny creatures in the water, really microscopic. And he says, in other words, live your life. The Torah was not given to angels. You live your life as you can, and you follow the Torah accordingly. Okay, I think we have time for one last halakha, which is, this one is very important, I think. Oh, no. Here, let's get number 14. I'll go here. It is extremely important for everyone, including a Jew, to learn the language and culture of his country. But it should not be a reason to abandon the religion. Rather, a God-fearing person should achieve a balance of both. That is, it's a small, tiny statement that he makes, but it's extremely important when we think of the way it is today understood. The whole. Remember that when I spoke about Sephardic tradition, this is actually a teshuvah that we have. I think that we have to study with more in depth. Maybe we'll continue next time. Let me show you his teshuvah originally. It's a long one. He speaks about Jewish education and how we approach it. So he speaks about his letters that he added in the book, and he speaks about education and how people should learn and what is the right education. Eventually he says this, גם כאשר לבב אנוש יתאווה תאווה ומצפה ומייחל מתי יגדלו הנערים יוצאי חלציו. Just as one waits and aspires for the moment in which his children will grow to the age למען אבית ולהורות אותם את המלאכה או המסחר אשר הורישו הוריו או אף מלאכת ומסחר זרים, in order to be able to teach him, the children, what he learned from his parents, maybe the profession that was a tradition of the family, or even any other line of work or knowledge. So that's everyone's hope. He says, כמו כן ציווה השם לזרע בית יעקב ללמד ולהורות את בניהם ובני בניהם את חוקי האלוהים ותורותיו. For us Jews, it's a requirement to teach the Torah and its pathways. So, and he says, unfortunately today, some people want only, and he uses a harsh language, to learn foreign cultures and abandon the Torah. He says, למלא גרון צאצאיהם אשכולות מרורות. He says, bitter clusters of grapes, but he uses the word ashkelot, like the word escuela, which is school. ללמדם ספר ולשון העמים. To teach them foreign cultures. גם מעט יחל הילד לפטפט, and from the moment the kids start talking, instead of teaching him psukim, הם מרגילים אותו רק בלשונות הגויים. So they only teach him the foreign languages. And he says, עוד זאת, עם המורה העברי, אף נדיב לב נהפך לצר עין. Unfortunately for the teachers who speak Hebrew, they became, he says, tsar ayin, they became stingy. They can't get enough books for their children. ובבית ספר עממי, כל אחד ספרו בידו לבדו. There are more budgets for the public schools. They each has his book. We don't have enough books in the in our schools. And he says that we cannot abandon the Hebrew education. This is a long discussion here. He says that nishtanu alenu adorot, the generations have changed. He says, I remember that when I was a kid, any merchant or storekeeper, מונחים לפניו בחנות ספרים שונים, תהילים, משניות, זוהר, עין יעקב, ספרי מוסר. In front of him in the store, there were different books that he would learn in between customers. והרצענים, even shoemakers, אשר היו 4 ו5 בחנות אחת, they would sit 4 or 5 in one shop. היו ידיהם תופרים ופיותיהם משוחחים זה עם זה. They would work with their hands, but meanwhile they would talk to each other about what they heard on Shabbat, the drasha, the sermon. מחווים דעתם בפירושי המקראות והאגדות. They would express their opinion on what is the commentary of the pasuk. And every day when we would go out of school, that they would ask us to tell us what we've learned in the psukim, and we would hear it everywhere. And by the way, I had the same experience when I was a kid. Next to our house, there was a grocery store owned by a Moroccan man. His name was Yitzhak Kislasi, and we all called him Adon Yitzhak. And every time I walked into the store, he would say a verse with my name. My name is Haim. So he says, Haim, Shali Mechana, Tatalo, Orech Haim. We would recite the whole thing. And he really had this air of constantly learning and all that. So in that teshuvah, he says that, as I said, that it's important to learn the language. The reason that people abandoned Hebrew and religion and all that is because there was a clear division between the knowledge of Hebrew and Torah and general studies. But if you link them, if you realize that one contributes to the other, then they could coexist. And he says, וכן עשו החכמים הראשונים והאחרונים שיעשירו את ספרותינו הקדושה בספריהם העיקריים. So that was the way of our great scholars who enriched our culture with their important books. So we go back to the okay, and here we'll just maybe touch on that case, and we'll go more in depth next week to explain like all the difficulties that stem from that. There was a case of a Kohen who was married to a non-Jewish woman. The Talmudic law says that a Kohen cannot marry a convert. For whatever reason, we're not into now. So a Kohen cannot marry a convert. Now, the problem is that she's not Jewish, but they're married. They already live together, married, of course, by civil law. And if the woman would ask for conversion, technically, according to Jewish law, they will have to divorce. So now, what is preferable? For them to live together as a non-Jewish and Jewish couple, like a mixed marriage, or for the rabbis to work actively towards the conversion of the woman, knowing that she'll end up marrying a Kohen. So rabbi-messas actually encouraged the conversion of the woman for the following reason. And I'll explain them all today. I don't want to leave it dangling for next week. So one, he said that the Kohen is already married. He's married according to civil law, and the Jewish authorities do not have the power to impose a divorce. Meaning, he's talking to those people who say that this union is contrary to Halakha, and we have to break it. We have to cause them to divorce. He says we don't have the means to do that. The Jewish court in Morocco cannot override the law of the country. Was at the time was under the French government. Second, the man does not want to get divorced because he loves his wife and because of the expenses of the process and the alimony. So first, the man loves his wife. He's not interested in getting divorced. But even if he would have, and because of religious reasons would want to do that, the process would be extremely long, the expenses, the alimony, and that is not something that he's going to do. He speaks in length about how difficult it is to convince people in such a situation to break the marriage, and he says it's usually ineffective. And I've dealt with cases like that, not necessarily with the Kohen, but the truth is not even with a convert or a non-Jew, with a situation where parents would come and say, we don't want our child to marry this man or this woman, etc. And I would tell them, unless you could prove that that person is a danger to your daughter, or mentally ill, or along these lines, you have no right to intervene. Unless you're afraid that your son is dragged to a cult by this future bride, you have no right to intervene. If you don't see a clear danger, it's not your domain. But unfortunately, people still do that. And when it comes to religion, if it's not the parents, then the whole community takes charge. So rabbi-messas says we don't have the legal power to do that, and it is impractical because of their love and because of the difficulty of the process. He says now he goes to another consideration. He says when the woman will convert, the Kohen will feel more comfortable with being observant, and he will not consider himself a sinner. That, I think, is the most important statement that he makes. But I'll go first to the last one and then go back to this one. He says, how do we know that the man is a Kohen? Maybe he's not a Kohen. How do you know that anyone is a Kohen? So, if you ask today, how do you know that someone is a Kohen? They will tell you, we have a tradition. The tradition is not enough. They will say, we did genetic testing and we have the DNA of Kohanim that has been identified. That also is not enough, for a very simple reason. According to Jewish law, someone who a Kohen is not allowed to marry a divorced woman. If a Kohen got divorced from his wife and remarried her, the children that he has are not valid Kohanim anymore, right? So now, what happened if at one point in the history of the family, one of the men wrote a note to his wife, I want to divorce you, and gave her the note. She is by law divorced. And then he regretted and he says, you know what, give me this note, let's throw it away, let's remarry, okay? And they now have children. So those children are not Kohanim. Nobody knows about that. So basically, any Kohen today is not really a Kohen for legal purposes. So that's the argument that it doesn't make that with all details, but it says it's doubtful whether it's a Kohen. But let's go back to the previous one. Rabbi Yosef Meshash does not want the man to consider himself a sinner. This is an extremely important educational concept. When we tell someone that he's not worthy, he's unworthy, that what he did was unlawful, while there's a way to defend his act, what we're doing we're putting on him a label of a sinner. and sometimes the religious leaders think that is the way to make this person repent, because now that he knows he's a sinner, he will repent, he will stop doing what he's doing. But it's not true. In many cases, what will happen is this: that person will think, you know what? Well, if I'm already a sinner, then let me enjoy the full spectrum of sin. Let me do other things. For example, if someone, let's say, started by, I've know of cases like that. A girl whose sleeves were not up to the wrist as her father wanted, and he said, "You're a sinner." She left the house, and eventually deteriorated to terrible conditions. Or someone who flipped the switch on Shabbat, and people yelled at him, "You're a sinner, you're a transgressor." He ended up abandoning religion altogether because he said, "Okay, I flipped the switch on Shabbat, and I didn't enjoy that sin so much, but let me try other things." This labeling of a sinner is extremely detrimental. And Rabbi Yosef says, as long as we have a way to remove this label and to find a way for the people to justify his acts within the framework of Halakha, as to pushing the envelope as far as possible, is justified. So this is what he says in this Halakha. And we'll conclude here. God willing, next week we'll pick up on